let's get started. So my name is Bronagh Sorota, and I'm a member of the providers team within ManageIQ Engineering. I've been working within the ManageIQ team for about 3 years, focusing on our integrations with Microsoft, most recently the Azure integration, to which we've added a number of new features available in the upcoming Darga release. So this seemed like a good opportunity to share some information on those new features. And you'll see my handle is Bronagh S, so you can get in touch with me, GitHub, Gitter. Okay, so the agenda. So first of all, I'll just call out the different features that are available in Darga, and we'll touch on the architecture of each, some considerations that you might want to keep in your back pocket, suggestions for usage of these features, and maybe some pointers for debugging, should you need it. Before we wrap up with Q&A, I'm going to give a couple of video demonstrations. Okay, so the new features that are available, first we have provisioning, we have events, metrics, instance retirement, smart state analysis, and I'll just now briefly mention that as of Darga, we now support an Azure hosted appliance, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so a little more about each feature. So starting with provisioning. So we offer private image provisioning. Provisioning from a public image on the Azure Marketplace isn't yet available. But for provisioning, and actually for all of these features, the features are already available in the product. We've just extended them to offer Azure support. So in provisioning, you're going to see the same provisioning dialogues that you're familiar with from provisioning for other cloud providers, such as the quotas, the approvals, the state machines, the general workflow. Retirement, we support both on-demand and scheduled instance retirement. And I'm going to give a demo of both of these at the end of the presentation. Smart state analysis is available, and what's very cool about this is Azure is the first cloud provider for which smart state analysis is offered. It's an agentless approach, and we use the Azure ARM API to read the blob storage. Event support. So reading events from Azure gives us visibility into changes within the provider. And so with these events, we can build timelines of changes over time, or we can act upon these events, refresh the inventory to keep it up to date. We can enforce control policies. We've also extended the event switchboard to support Azure also. Metrics support has just been added to, I think, the latest sprint. Today we offer CPU utilization. We're in the process of adding support for a number of other counters. And some considerations that you might want to bear in mind. For each of these features, there is a role that you have to enable. So for provisioning, you must ensure the automation engine server role is enabled. One important point to bear in mind is that you must create your private images beforehand, and you can use Microsoft tools to do so. Actually, there's a web front end to the REST API, the Azure ARM REST API. It's resources.azure.com. That's the one that I always use. It's really helpful. There's a link to that at the end of the deck. Another thing to bear in mind is that during the provisioning process, it is required that you create a set of user credentials, and these are passed to the Azure API. And it's the same with network adapter. We take the cloud network and the subnet, and we create a network interface on the new instance through the ARM API. And what's nice about this is that you don't have to rely on creating a customization template to do this configuration. However, customization, template support is in place, and that's included in my demo. So instance retirement, again, you must have the automation engine server role enabled. One thing that you should bear in mind is only the instance is removed. And you're probably all going to come across this, and hopefully you're going to remember this, that IP addresses, network adapters do hang around. And it's by design, whether you remove an instance via the portal or through the Azure ARM API, only the instance is removed. The network information remains, so it can be reused for new instances that are provisioned. Smart state analysis, make sure that you have enabled the smart state analysis and smart proxy roles. Put some consideration into your zones and your roles. That's kind of true for all of the features, but I think mostly smart state analysis and metric collection. They're the more intensive. Smart state analysis can be scheduled in advance, triggered on demand, it can be executed on demand, or it can be triggered upon receipt of a particular event. There is a data transfer cost if the ManageIQ appliance is external to Azure. So there's actually, I think, a web page on the Azure website that gives some good detail on the different tiers of pricing for transferring that data. If the ManageIQ appliance is in Azure, then you will not incur that cost. For events, make sure you've enabled the event monitor role. When the server starts up for the first time, we poll for events that have been fired from Azure within the previous minute. Thereafter, it's every 15 seconds. We will poll for new events. But that 15 seconds is configurable in the Azure settings, in the UI settings. Metric collection, you've got 3 roles this time to enable in the settings, and you must remember to enable for the region also. On the Azure portal, at the instance level, you have to enable diagnostic collection. I think by default that's enabled anyway, and there is a cost associated with collecting this diagnostics information on the Azure end. Now some direction on how to use the features. So for provisioning of instances, you will open the Cloud Instance view and kick off the provisioning workflows from the Lifecycle menu item. You'll select the image you wish to provision from, and you'll complete the dialogues. And once the request is launched, you can keep track of that request in the services request queue. And so for retirement, you'll navigate to the Cloud Instances view again. You'll select the instance you wish to retire. And then from the Lifecycle menu, you can trigger an on-demand retirement or schedule one for the future. Smart state analysis can be triggered 3 different ways. On demand in the Cloud Instances view or Images view. You can schedule it in advance, or you can trigger it through the event switchboard. And you can keep track of your smart state requests by looking at the tasks queue and settings. So for Azure events, as I mentioned, we've extended the event switchboard to support Azure events. And by default, 5 Azure events are pre-configured to kick off an EMS refresh upon receipt. And I've made a couple of suggestions at the bottom of 3 more events that you might be helpful to include in your event switchboard. So the first one is, this event's fired when a new image is, when an instance is captured in Azure. So you'd end up with a new image. The second one is when a network security group is created, and the third one is a new resource group. And these are particularly useful because you might want to do an EMS refresh when these events are fired so that your provisioning dialogues have got the latest information. Metrics, you can view utilization charts at the instance level from the monitoring menu item. And here's a screenshot. As you can see, we can flip, we can change intervals and time ranges. And so when debugging any of these features, I mean, there's some common steps that you might want to follow for any of them. The first one is you would enable debug logging in the settings. And I've pasted an example of some strings you might want to grep for in your log files. For, in this case, it's for debugging, provisioning, or retirement. And then on the Azure portal, pretty much anytime anything happens, it is logged in the Azure audit logs. So you might want to just go straight to the source. I've pasted the link in here, and it'll tell you, it'll keep a record of pretty much everything that's happened. So in debugging smart state analysis, you'll check are your roles enabled, as you would for really any of these features, and you'll monitor the status of your smart state analysis task in the task queue. And then here with events, I've given I'm sharing a grep command that you might want to use to create a list of all events that have been received by ManageIQ, and again a link to the audit log in the Azure portal. With metrics, make sure that you've enabled the KEP&U rule for the region, and make sure that you've enabled diagnostics collection at the instant level on the Azure portal. So now I've got a few video demonstrations. So first we'll look at instance provisioning. So here we're in the instance view of the provider. And I'm going to kick off the provisioning request from the Lifecycle menu. Select the image I wish to provision from. Enter in the request information. Optionally set a tag. Indicate the number of instances I wish to create and set an instance name. I'm going to manually place the instance, although we support automatic placement. So I'll set a network, subnet, optionally a security group, and a resource group, where a resource group is a collection of resources that share a deployment lifecycle, such as the assets that make up an application. And I'll set a flavor. And this is where I mentioned that we create a set of credentials as part of the provisioning request, and these are required by the Azure API. I'm going to set my IP address and DNS information using DHCP. And here I've created a Cloud Init script that points to the Google name server instead of the default one. That'll be executed once the instance has been provisioned and is up and running. And I'm going to kick off this request immediately. So now the request is in the pending approvals phase, and this is where the request is compared to any quotas and limits placed on the user or the user group. And you'll see this request has been approved. And I will switch over to the Azure portal. We'll check on its status. So there you'll see second row from the bottom, the instance is being created. And now it's running. So now I want to check to see if Cloud Init did execute my script correctly. And to do so, I'm going to log into the server using the credentials that we created. And to verify, I'm going to open the resolve.conf file. And check the name server. And it looks good. So now we'll go back to the ManageIQ UI. We'll look at the instance view, and we'll see as our new instance being created. And there it is at the far right. Do a quick sanity check. Its properties look good. Okay. So now I've got a demo of retiring an instance. And so here we're in the cloud instance view. And we'll select the instance we wish to retire. It's called Azure RHEL 7. Lifecycle, retire this instance, so it's on demand. Back to the Azure portal. We got the instance view up. You'll see it's still running. And now the status has changed to deleting. Back to the ManageIQ UI, you'll see that the retirement state is retiring. Now we're going to reload the instance view of our provider, and we're going to look for the instance, and you'll see it's gone. So now we have a demo of executing smart state analysis on an instance. Again, we're in the instance view of the provider, and we've opened up the instance we wish to run smart state analysis on, and you'll see that the details are pretty sparse. We don't have a drift history or user and groups information. So now we've kicked off SSA. And next we'll take a look at the task queue, and we'll keep track of the status of our smart state analysis. So you see the state is scanning. So I think this usually takes, for a Linux box, about 10 minutes or so, but I've sped up the video. Okay, you'll see that the task is completed. So we'll click on the task, and it'll take us to the instance. And now you'll see we have more detailed information, such as we've got a drift history. We've got some users. We'll take a look at the users. We got 57 groups. And finally, I've got a demonstration of Azure Event Support. So again, we're looking at the instance view of an Azure provider, and you'll see that every instance is powered off except one. That instance is called Azure Demo. And so to demonstrate events, I'm going to power off this instance. Now, without event support in place, I would have to manually refresh the provider to get an updated power status property on the instance. But with event support in place, all I have to do is reload the browser, because an EMS refresh is automatically going to be kicked off. And you'll see the power status quadrant has changed to indicate the instance is off. So next we'll take a look in Automate at the event switchboard. I mentioned that by default 5 Azure events come pre-configured to do an EMS refresh. This can be customized. You can do whatever you want. You can do a smart state analysis. You could. So we'll take a look at one as an example. It's pretty small. You can see that. You'll see the action is an EMS refresh, but you might have to take my word for it. So finally, I'm going to show a sample report widget. It just reads events from the database. So this report, it reports on the most frequently fired events, but it's just an example. It might give you some ideas of potential reports you could run yourselves. And so here we have a support matrix that illustrates what we have support for in our Azure integration today. I think it's like a healthy enough list. There's a couple of features that are not yet implemented that I believe are next in line. Those with an asterisk beside them, they're the features that were implemented in the Darga release. So I've shared some links to helpful articles on Azure. The first 3 are around creating private images that you must do for private image provisioning. The second bullet, Managing Azure, there's a link to the portal. And the second link is the one I mentioned earlier, resources.azure.com. That's the one I use a lot. It's a very basic web front end to the Azure ARM API. And last but certainly not least, this is a link to our Azure ARM REST gem wiki, because we have a gem that sits between ManageIQ and the Azure ARM API. Here we have the pull requests for each of these features, in case anybody would like to dig a little deeper. And that's it.
Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
All right, we got one in the front. Yeah.
Public image, if you could repeat the question.
So the question is, what about public images for Azure? So in Azure, we have a public marketplace where you go to provision an instance on the Azure side. I am not sure where on the roadmap it falls, but I know it's on the roadmap, but I don't know when it's going to be implemented. And I know that our wizard Daniel here, he's already been, at least he's done some basic work on it, at least. So it's going to come, but I just don't know when.
Can you do the smart state analysis on Azure from an external running appliance, or do you have to have an appliance running inside Azure to do that?
No, it can be external to Azure.
Great.
Yep. But just bear in mind that if it's external to Azure, as I mentioned, there's that data transfer cost that is documented on the Azure website.
So since we're working with private images here, is it been thought of, or is it on the roadmap possibly to where we can say our image we're using in Azure originated from this on-prem template and like doing some type of genealogy drift analysis with that?
They had like the source, where did it come from? I guess I might want to defer to Rich, who works on the smart state analysis piece. Is there a way to track where a particular image originally came from?
Normally, after the fact, it might be difficult in some environments. I'm not that familiar with what's available on Azure. In some environments, the whole snapshot tree from which images are created is available, and then you could actually acquire that information after the fact. But I would think going forward, if we're in place and, as you see, we monitor events and collect drift history, we could also record what's being generated from what source and keep track of that and report that as well. So technically, it's not part of Smart State.
To add to that, if you provision the instance through ManageIQ, as part of that provisioning post-processing, we actually create that genealogy link. So that'll happen, if you're doing it through the product.
Other questions? Anyone else? Other questions?
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, looks like it. Thank you.
Thank you.